from Apricot Polkadot, and I hope you are excited about cross stitch because today I'm going to show you all the basics for how to get started. I really love cross stitch. I think my mom taught me when I was probably in 3rd or 4th grade, and it's one of those things that once you learn once, it sticks with you forever, and so you can continue to do it forever. This is a cross stitch that I just completed. It's actually a pattern that's available in my Etsy shop. It's a temperature cross stitch, so you just stitch a little bit every day, and then the color is dependent upon the weather for the day. So as you go along, the colors change, but you can see that it's just these little tiny stitches. They actually make an X. That's why it's called a cross stitch. And you'll see that it's just tiny stitching in these tiny little squares in this special fabric. This is another cross stitch pattern, also available in my Etsy shop. Slightly different. You have little arches instead of one big pattern, but it's still just these tiny stitches that make a really fun art piece for your home. So to start with a cross stitch, you will need a couple things. You're going to need some floss. I really like DMC floss. It's available at pretty much every craft store. It's available at Michael's and Hobby Lobby and Walmart, and it comes in thousands of colors, so it's fantastic. Maybe 1,000 is a little excessive, but it comes in lots and lots of colors, and I really like the quality and the color selection with that. You'll need a needle. Any thinner needle will do, just so long as it has a big enough eye so that you can thread your floss through. You'll need some little tiny scissors. Any scissors will do. And you'll need an embroidery hoop. This just holds your fabric in place and makes it sort of taut so that it's easier to get your needle through the fabric. And then you'll need some cross stitch fabric. Now let's talk about that for just a minute. Cross stitch fabric comes in different sizes, and you'll see it measured by a count size. So this is 14 count cross stitch fabric, and what that means is 14 stitches across will fit in 1 inch of this fabric. So 14 little stitches per 1 inch. You'll see other fabrics that are like, if it's 18 count cross stitch, that will actually be a smaller stitch because you can fit more stitches into that 1 inch. They do make some that has a slightly higher count as well. But this is 14, which is fairly standard. Now to get started, you're going to need to look at your pattern, and you're going to need to find the center of your pattern and the center of your fabric. You don't want to run out of room as you're stitching, so you want to make sure you kind of gauge everything around the center of your fabric. So in order to do that, I actually do a little bit of origami, and I fold it in half and fold it in half again to find my center point. And it doesn't have to be exact, but just somewhere right around the middle. So this we can see is going to be our center, and then I'm going to put on an embroidery hoop here to hold my fabric taut while I'm stitching. Embroidery hoop size doesn't really matter a whole lot. You can kind of just go with whatever you prefer. I often will use a small embroidery hoop because then I can travel with it a little bit easier, and this fabric is pretty stiff still, so it sometimes will take a minute to get your hoop on. There we go. Okay, now once you've got that, I will also have a link to some of my favorite products, my favorite fabric, and my favorite hoop, and all that stuff at the bottom of this video, and also on my website. So if you're looking for products, you can look there for sure. Okay, now let's talk about threading your needle. So with floss comes with 6 strands of individual string in it. So when you're going to cross stitch, you want to use 2 of those strings at a time. So you cut a length of your floss, and then you actually will pull it apart. You'll pull out 2 strands to thread your needle. So you just, once you have that, you'll have your needle ready to go, but you want to make sure you're using 2 strands at a time. Now on your pattern, it's often easiest to start in the center of your pattern so that you know that you have enough space to make sure your whole project will fit on your fabric. But in some cases, like the case of these rainbows, I actually needed to start up at the top because this is actually a monthly temperature pattern, and each arch represents 1 day. And so you have to start at the top in order to work your days correctly. So if that's the case, you want to count on your actual pattern to where you need to start, like count how many squares up and how many across, and then you'll do the same thing on your fabric. But for the sake of today, we're going to just start in the center, and we're just going to practice by doing just a few stitches. So I don't like to put knots into my cross stitch fabric because it makes it bulky and sometimes it makes it too visible from the back side. So what I like to do, we're going to flip it over, is I like to gather up my end with my stitches so that the stitches hold the end in place without me having to do a knot. So we're going to start here. All right, we've pulled it through most of the way. Now I kind of like to hold that little end with my fingers. Okay, now we're going to start making our X, but we're just going to do 1/2 of the X right now. So there we have our first one. When I'm using one color, I try to go across the fabric for as many stitches as I need to in that color with just 1/2 of the X before I finish the other half. I find that it's easier to go across with just 1/2 in the same color and then finish it up going back the other direction rather than trying to make one complete X at a time. It just moves a little bit quicker in my opinion. So we have our first one. Now we're going to try to grab this end with our next stitch. So we're going to put our needle through so that it's going to grab it. And remember, we're just going to go across. We're going to just do 5 stitches across. So there's 2. Now you can see that I actually grabbed that end under this little stitch here. So now you're going to need to hold it, be a little bit careful at the beginning with the first few stitches just to make sure that it doesn't come out. You don't pull too hard at the beginning, but after a few it will be pretty well held in place. So I'm going to continue doing the next 3 stitches to make our 5 total, and then we'll go back the other direction. Okay, so now we have our beginning part of our first 5 stitches. So it's just 1/2 of each stitch, and you'll notice on the back that our end got grabbed up by 2 of these stitches, and so now it should be pretty securely in place. And once we add the other half of our X, it will definitely be held in place. So to do the other half, you're just going to go the opposite diagonal across. So here we go. We'll get that started with this one. And now you can see we have our first X. So we've made one complete cross stitch. And I'm going to go ahead and finish up this row, and then we'll talk about ending it in just a minute. Okay, now we have our first 5 little X's. You can see those tiny X. So now we have our first row. What I like to do to finish it off, again, I don't like to add a knot. I like to use the existing stitches to finish it off and secure my end. So I just go through some of the backs of these stitches, feed my needle through, and then once you have that, then you can just clip your end. Now if you wanted to start a new color, you could use these existing stitches and just go through them again with your new color so that it will already be sort of held in place. You'll need to again be careful when you start a new color so that you don't pull too hard and pull the thread all the way through. Or you can do it like we did and just hold your end and stitch over it with your new stitches. But that's all you do to add a new color as well. So that is it. And once you get the hang of it, it will go a lot quicker and you'll be able to make some really beautiful creations, some fun cross-stitch patterns. And make sure you check out my website, apricotpolkadot.com, and my YouTube channel for more fun tutorials and to find all the products that I love for crafting. And hopefully you'll be making some beautiful artwork and beautiful crafty creations in no time.